Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the INTP stream. Today, I want to talk about, this continues a series that on government engineering, I suppose, and political procedure optimization. Wherein which I attempt to optimize various elements and aspects and processes that are contained within our political system or constitute it in order to try to find ways to make it function better. Because there are many reasons to complain about the system we have in the United States specifically, even while some on the right and on the left like to glorify the original design and the logic of the design. It's important that we put even cherished traditional procedures, political procedures and democratic procedures and legal procedures under the knife of scrutiny, because if we can do that effectively, we can make the government function more effectively. And that's important because we need a functional system, a good and functional system. So that's the purpose of this. That's the purpose of this this video here. Now, sorry, give me 1 second. Sorry, my screen turned off, and because I had not set the caffeine app up yet. Okay, good. Now we're running. At least now I can see that I'm running. That we're running. In any case, the concept that I want to cover in this video is the relationship between election frequency and political performance quality, right? What is the relationship between the frequency at which we hold elections as it relates to term lengths, right? So we have a presidential election every how many years? Every 4 years. We have congressional elections every 2 years. The duration of their terms is, respectively 2 and 4 years. And the key idea here is that each term is punctuated by a new election, where the sitting incumbent is subject to scrutiny by the people, potentially if there aren't term limits, then the people decide whether the incumbent remains or whether the incumbent is ousted, right? So the key idea is that here, at least the key idea that I'm trying to advance is that it matters what the frequency is at which we hold elections as it relates to the quality, the level at which our elected representatives perform, right? And it's important that we keep, and that's obviously important. We want competent, judicious, and ideally virtuous and intelligent elected representatives. And the only way that we can ensure that competence is maintained in these offices and right action is produced by these offices is to continually subject our elected leaders to electoral revision, to electoral scrutiny, wherein which the people decide whether the incumbent, if they can serve another term, should remain, or whether a new face should come into the office. So at least in this video, what I'm trying to get across is that there may be some benefit of increasing election frequency. and shortening term lengths, irrespective of how we assign term limits, right? There may be some advantage to increasing the frequency at which we subject our elected leaders to electoral scrutiny, democratic scrutiny. By increasing election frequency, we may be able to, by shortening term lengths, we may be able to increase the we may be able to increase the performance quality of our elected representatives according to objective metrics with which we can measure performance. This is not a very complex idea, but I think at least questioning why we've determined that, at least questioning, why terms have these specific lengths, and why we hold elections, at the frequency we do. It's at least worth questioning why we do that. And there's always a teleology, right? A purpose behind the political, procedures that we've established, and the electoral procedures that we've established. There's always a teleology, but regardless, there may be some room for further optimization, even if there are good de jure intentions behind our procedures. It's obviously the case that even very good de jure intentions can have disastrous de facto effects. So what I'm arguing for in this video, at least the key idea, which I've probably already, so just to state again for clarity, what I'm arguing in this video is that there may be some advantage to increasing election frequency and shortening term lengths, in terms of being able to enhance the performance of our elected representatives. So, what would this look like? How could I further concretize this idea? What would the term length be, though? For the president, what would the term length be for a congressperson, to use a gender-neutral term? Well, for the president, let's say that it's 1 year, right? Let's say that each year we hold a presidential election. Logistically, this can be executed. Would it be difficult to generate turnout? Would it be harder for the people to have the obligation to vote in elections of increasing frequency? Sure, right? I don't think, notwithstanding, I don't think that's a decisive or defeating objection to what I'm proposing here, right? People turn out. We've got, very poor turnout. And in previous videos, I've talked about ways that we could increase turnout by both economically incentivizing voters in various ways, and making it easier to vote, right? So it's both a removal of disincentives and a use of incentives, right? And in that way, we could increase turnout regardless. I don't think that this would really tax or impose any kind of, monstrous burden on the people to have, this is what a democracy is, and voting in elections and holding elections is key. It's at the very core of the system we have. And so logistically, I think that something like this would be achievable. But let's not so much focus on the logistical difficulties in the execution of the change. Let's focus on the merits of the change, of this proposal, rather than the demerits of this proposal. In terms of the merits of increasing election frequency, I think the logic that I'm trying to explain here, get across in a concrete way, is this. We get a new president, right, which we have now. And, let's say that early in office they blunder, right? Something goes wrong. Or they do something that is, they exhibit suboptimal performance in some way. They're a blunderer. Well, with the current term lengths and the current election frequency, If they blunder, we're stuck with them for another, 3-4 years. We're stuck with them. We're stuck with a suboptimal representative. If we increase election frequency, power is subjected to ever more attempts at revision and improving it. If we increase election frequency, then the blunderer, the suboptimal representative, of which we've had many, would be out of office by the end of the year rather than at the end of the 4-year term, right? And, it seems obvious, but it's not an obvious question to ask. And I really don't think any of this constitutes reinventing the wheel. I think it's just improving the wheel. So, yeah, and I think that via that concrete logic, I can very easily get across the fact that, or at least explain how there's a relationship between, there could be a benefit to increasing election frequency and lowering term lengths to ensure that those in power are scrutinized with ever greater intensity at ever greater frequencies, to ensure that, when we do get a bad representative or elected leader, they're out of office, relatively quickly. So yeah, that's the basic idea. Rather simple, but not an obvious question to ask. Yeah, and I think that, this proposal, this change, wouldn't ultimately make it so. Like, it wouldn't, in producing positive effects, make itself unnecessary, right? Because under this system, ideally, you would get more effective representatives, naturally, in certain cases, in general. And so, but it's ultimately this change that would ensure that representatives are ever more effective. Yeah, or at least theoretically it could, right? Notwithstanding any of the logistical problems with this, if there are any major ones, something merely being difficult to execute does not mean that it's inherently a bad proposal. Yeah, so that's the basic idea. Now, what other effects